Hi, my name's Zoe Blade and today I'd like to talk to you about ST Speech. This is an Atari ST. And back in 1986 in Britain, its main competitor was the Commodore Amiga. There was also the Apple Macintosh, but really no one in Europe could afford one of those, so it was mostly the Amiga and ST. And much like the Macintosh had Macintalk, its speech synthesizer, the Commodore Amiga had Say, but the ST didn't have a speech synthesizer. So two programmers, Andy Beveridge and Martin Day, aka Spiny Norman, took it upon themselves to make one. I'm assuming he's named Spiny Norman as in the large hedgehog who was searching for Dimmesdale in the Monty Python sketch. So they made a speech synthesizer called ST Speech. And because it was on the Atari ST, which happened to have built-in MIDI ports and therefore lots of MIDI sequencers, lots of musicians had the Atari ST, and ST Speech ended up as a cover mount on a bunch of magazines. So a bunch of musicians, especially making dance music, ended up using ST Speech because it was the speech synthesizer that they had to hand. After making it, let's see, you may be also aware of their work for the assembly line, where they made, for example, games like Pipe Dream, and they made Xenon 2 Mega Blast for the Bitmap Brothers. The one that samples that song that charted, the Assault on Precinct 13 cover by Bomb the Bass. And in addition to that, probably the most influential work was an assembler that Martin Day made, the Spiky Norman assembler, or SNASM for short. This was used to make various games and things for the 68000 chip on the ST and the Amiga, and eventually on the Sega Mega Drive, where it became part of the official development kit. And for the successor for that, they made something for Psygnosis called PsyQ, which became part of the official development kit for the Sony PlayStation. So these two did quite well for themselves outside of making speech synthesizers as well.
Power pill. Eat them up, yum yum. Electronic techno music controlled manually by effects twins program. Can you follow me in your dreams? Can you feel me like I feel you? Goodbye, mother.
It does have some other options, like there's a phoneme mode where you can type in the phonemes directly, and you can change the pitch and speed independently of each other. But for most people's purposes, you just type in text, it says them out loud. If it doesn't say them as you were hoping it would, you just misspell it until it does. And if you want to change the pitch or speed, I think for most people's purposes, you'll find just sampling it and then playing it back on a different key on the keyboard to change them proportionally. Certainly in the 90s, anyone who had a MIDI sequencer in the Atari ST happened to have this anyway, because it was on the cover mounts of magazines. They're not going to know, they didn't have the instructions, they're not going to know about all of that. They would have just sampled it and manipulated it as a sample, so that's a fine way to use it in my opinion. As far as speech synthesizers go, even by 1980s standards, I think it was fairly primitive. No one's going to think this is a particular actor talking to them. This is clearly a machine talking to you. And I think for something like techno music, that really is appropriate and fits the aesthetic really well. It's got this lovely kind of retro-futuristic charm to it. And in my opinion, is a kind of charming speech synthesizer. So I do recommend playing around with it if you get the chance. Thank you to my patrons for sponsoring this, and for everyone, I hope you enjoyed watching it, maybe learned something. I had no idea the ST Speech guys were the SNASM guys. That's something interesting, huh? Yeah, so thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
Dimmesdale?